Good evening and welcome to the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design Robert B. Church Lecture Series. I am very excited to present tonight's guest speaker, Rafiq Anadol. Rafiq Anadol is a media artist and a director born in Istanbul, Turkey. Rafiq currently lives in and works in Los Angeles, California. He is the lecturer and visiting researcher in UCLA Department of Design and Media Arts. Rafiq is working on the fields of site-specific public art with parametric data, sculpture approach, and live audiovisual performance with immersive installation approach. Particularly, his works explore the space among digital and physical entities by creating a hybrid relationship between architecture and media arts with machine intelligence. He holds a Master of Fine Arts degree from University of California, Los Angeles in Media Arts, Master of Fine Arts degree from the Istanbul Bilgi University in Visual Communication Design, as well as a Bachelor's of Arts degree with summa cum laude in photography and video. As a media artist, designer, and spatial thinker, Rafiq Anadol is intrigued by the ways in which the transformation of a subject of contemporary culture requires rethinking of a new aesthetic technique and dynamic perception of space. Anadol builds his work on a nomadic subject reaction and interaction with unconventional spatial orientations, with data and machine intelligence, embedded media arts in architecture. He questions the possibility of post-digital architecture future in which there is no more non-digital realities. He invites the viewers to visualize alternative realities by presenting them in possibility of redefining the functionalities of both interior and exterior architecture formations. Anadol's work suggests that all spaces and facades have potentials to be utilized as a media artist canvases. Rafiq is a recipient of a numerous number of awards and prizes, including the Microsoft Research Best Vision Award, the German Design Award, the UCLA Art and Architecture Moss Award, University of California Institute of Research for Arts Award, and SEGD Global Design Awards and Google's Art, and Machine Intelligent Artist Residency Award, just to name a few. I was first introduced to Rafiq work while I was at SOM Chicago during a firm-wide design meeting. There was a magnificent presentation for the 350 Mission Street skyscraper in San Francisco, and it featured his breathtaking digital mural in the tower lobby. Rafiq combines media art and neurosciences, creating meditative masterpieces, and was described by Interesting Engineering magazine as the Leonardo da Vinci of the 21st century. For attendees during the lecture, if you have any question, please, you can type them in the Q&A and we'll address them after the lecture. Without further ado, allow me to welcome Rafiq Anadol. It's great to have you here and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for the invitation and hello everyone. Great to be here connected with you in these interesting days for humanity. And I would like to start my presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay. Just a second. Okay, hope you can see my screen and everything is working. And hello again, I'm Rafiq Anadol, and I am right now joining you from my studio in Los Angeles, California. Right now, of course, of the pandemic and its reaction on us is making things a little bit challenging, but we are trying to be connected and hoping everyone is safe and healthy and hopefully mentally everyone is connected. I am currently residing in my studio and leading my team, especially the last 7 years. But before I start my journey, please have a look at my website because I know the Zoom is not the best environment for sharing video experience. But you are very welcome to also follow me in any social media for any questions or any other updates. I'm very connected as much as I can in these heavy days. So before I start this presentation, that's my habit to dedicate this lecture to my heroes, to the teachers and the mentors who give me this chance to become who I am. So I hope that any upcoming generation have the same respect and same connection with our past and just remember who we are. So today I would like to share this presentation and the lecture in three sections. The very first one will focus on my early founding as a media artist, as a creator. And second is founding studio, which is I am on the shoulders of many giants. And the third is basically my journey with machine intelligence. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey, a city that I think if you ever been in, but it's really very unique space and geographically very, very unique city with 17 million people. And the city itself holds its location between left and right, east and west, and Europe and Anatolia. It's a functionally very inspiring city, and many centuries long culture is added on top of each other. And I grew up in this beautiful city, but one thing happened in this city is I watched my first inspiration in life, that I'm calling it, the movie that Ridley Scott had, one of my hero, also Philip K. Dick's amazing approach to the science fiction. I was inspired by this idea of a near future. And I think since then, I never stopped thinking about science fiction, that intentionally deep dive into the idea of remembering the future concept. But I was 8 years old when I watched this movie, but I was much more inspired. By the way, as maybe many of you know, that the specific movie was depicting 2019 Los Angeles, which is what we are seeing here. And the same year, actually, when I was 8 years old, got my first computer, which was a really inspiring another day. And that was the first time I learned about the computation concept, like a machine can hear me, machine can, just remember with me, a machine that can allow me to play a game. And like this gamification concept of a space started like back in time. And I was just super inspired by basically the idea of working with a machine simply. My early studies at undergrad was focused on photography. The very first year at my undergrad year, I was interestingly felt so much connected with architecture as a space and time, but I found myself abstracting the time and space in architecture, but not just looking for the function of the space, but go beyond what we perceive in daily life. During my understudies at Bill University, our department was one of the most really interestingly pushy and cutting edge contemporary lecturers and professors. And I was very fortunate to work also for my scholarship, work almost every single day at the department. The system allows me to stay in the academia, so don't go outside academic reality, which allows me not to work for commercial environments, but just work for the academic purpose. And I was very fortunate that in 2009, worked with this one of the most complex media art installations and media art museum installations and an exhibition called Uncharted. And in the exhibition, I was responsible for going to the German Karlsruhe, an institution called ZKM, where many heroes such as Peter Weibel, Jeffrey Shaw, and many others have been creating the very early pioneers work with media arts, such as using art, science, and technology. And I was responsible for handling this installation, curations, and many other things. Around those visits, I was so fortunate to witness also in Berlin one of the most inspiring events that was called Media Facades Exhibition. And in the exhibition, there were many, many pioneer people that were allowing people like me, students like me, opening our minds to think about the future of architecture, future of the media facades, basically and simply embedding media arts into architecture. And I was extremely in love with this context because I was for sure and not enjoying the idea of only using, no offense, but boring materials such as like concrete, glass, or steel. I was 100% sure that the future of architecture is beyond just that what we can perceive. And also in that amazing lecture, I went, Lev Manovich, one of my heroes as well, he was sharing an amazing piece of academic article, says, in other words, architects along with artists can take the next logical step to consider the invisible space of electronic data flows as substance rather than just as void, something that needs a structure, a politics, and a poetics. That was just one of the fantastic time. I clearly remember that that's exactly what you will see in my work, that the data flows becoming more visible and making invisible more visible and so on. But I was extremely inspired by light as a material. In my undergrad years, I was completely enjoyed the idea of a material that can compute, a material that can represent the imagination, the dreams, or the potential creativity, a material that has no prejudice, a material that can be, from the scientific point of view, can become a particle or a wavelength for a quantum computation point of view, or the material that we need to survive, right? So from that point of view, I was also very inspired by the early studies of like 2 and 3D dimensional thinking, like spatial imagination for humanity. And if you look at the painting concept, there was many inspiring people who have been trying to like contemplate or try to speculate the world of like 3 dimensionality. And especially Trompe l'oeil, especially in architecture, I was completely enjoyed researching how actually this technique had been used over the centuries, especially in Renaissance, 1300 and 1600s. But what was really powerful for me that I just started like think, okay, how can I take all these ideas and start to imagine a perception, a kind of a new ways of augmenting built environments. 2009, I started using a software called VVVV4V. It's a custom software development tool that allows you to create a visual programming language. And what you see is on the left side, the cubicle space is an architectural space where the Contemporary Art Museum is. And on the right side, like Tate Modern, there's like a 200 years electric turbine and facility. And the idea was, how can I take this everyday building that I'm seeing in my school years and transform into a canvas? And transforming this building into a living organism in my own terms, of course, not living, but transforming the perception of the building through the lens of technology, computation, and using light as a material and architecture as a canvas. The whole idea of transforming built environments started for me. So, and this idea quickly escalated, and I did many versions of it around Europe, such as Ars Electronica, even Sana's beautiful building, School of Design building in Essen-Werden. And here what you are seeing is on the upper row is basically like what an architecture can be by drawings, but on the lower side, you can see what an architecture could be if the light becomes a material and shows behind what we can perceive. But then suddenly everything became too repetitive. And then I was really like getting boring, to be honest, in like 2 years. And I was just looking for how to get out of this comfort zone. And then I was very fortunate to invite by the Istanbul Biennale 2011. And that was when I started like thinking about, can data become a pigment? Can data become a form? Can data become like a kind of a surface to augment? And thanks to my colleague, also AUD UCLA alumni, Alper Derimboğaz, an architect and also a fantastic friend, we just collaborate to understand how can we transform data, especially sound data, and transform it into a 3-dimensional surface, a piece of experience on a building in 3-dimensional and in a public space. We were able, by the way, the idea of using data, not only just, bunch of numbers very openly for me, it's basically kind of a form of a memory. If you think about a city is one of the most fundamentally important streets, such as every single maybe weekend, you can have 1.5 million people walking. It's one of the most important part of the city. It's a memory kind of a location where the protest, happiness, all kind of religions, like it's a very vital space for the city. And I found that the sound is one of those memories for the street. But of course, when I was started like learning about how a data can become a space, of course, the early world of understanding data was just splines and amplitude and frequencies. But for me, what was really inspiring is not only use a raw data as it is, but this very inspiring code for me, like it was 2010, 11, Ken Perlin's amazing Perlin noise. It was, by the way, first code I just memorized for 6 lines of code. I started inspired by the algorithms. So not only data, but also algorithms becomes like so inspiring. So the whole idea was what will happen if an algorithm and a data come together and become a new space. And this idea of a frame you will see in my works is since 2011, I am trying to speculate a 3-dimensional artworks around the frame. And as a finale, we were able to generate this piece. So what you are seeing is simply a 3-dimensional data sculpture with 9-channel projection, and a camera records the street, and the movements in the street also becomes a part of the experience. And this project was really truly challenge because what you watch was done in just 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, computation, data collection, form finding, fabrication, permits, you name it. And it was just one of those moments in life that, I mean, if I could do this kind of level, production and producing an experience and making dream to reality, what else I could do if I have more time and resources. So those are like the early days that I started like learning about what can a data become more than just a surface. But at the meantime, I was very inspired by the idea of using digital and physical worlds. And as William Gibson says, one of the things our grandchildren will find quantities about is that we will distinguish the digital from the real. And it was a very perfect time to also imagine how actually the technology is transforming who we are, and how actually our DNA and gene is changing, how the culture is becoming a whole new kind of an entity, but most importantly, how actually things are controlling us, the systems, the hardware, the software, like the systems around us are becoming more and more smart and smart. And as we all know about that, and about life and technology kind of seems to be immaterial flows of information and are constantly coming together. But at the meantime, there's this interesting special problem of life that we will not know like where we are in physical or virtual world. Specifically, sense of displacement starts to appear in humanity. While the first thing we see in the morning a machine, the last thing we saw at night is a machine, the life was going through in between these two checkpoints. But also the life in the art world also getting more interesting. I mean, the upcoming generations were finding information and data in just a couple of seconds. Nobody want to maybe perhaps wait for many, many hours for a fun physical experience. Information gets basically out of control, and have the democracy of information was becoming really exciting and also problematic. And also the big question is like, is it really possible to find ways to make people themselves more engaged with and ultimately responsible for the spaces that they inhabit? I think this is one of the most great quote that I found is design is a solution to a problem. Art is a question to a problem, as John Maida's wonderfully inputs, which I take as like a very serious thing and ask this question: what does it really mean to be a human in 21st century? And to really answer these questions, I didn't want to like go too like out of control and that just diversify, but I just really try to focus three things: how actually humans, machines, and environments coming together can be already an inspiring triangle of serendipity, and the same serendipity also appears when art, science, and technology comes together. So I'm trying to find narratives around this triangle, and you will see that in my work. I'm constantly understanding how a physical and virtual world blends together purposefully and meaningfully. So coming back to like Blade Runner, to study again and just get my second leap, I think, in life to find the big purpose, I guess, like why am I here in this universe with this reality concept? I decided to like go one more time, understanding my skill set and my purpose. So I decided to come to UCLA Design Media Arts department, where I got my second MFA degree. Of course, my hope was following the Blade Runner dream, but when I come to Los Angeles was looking like this. So there was a big difference between what I dream and what I was solving. So that's why it was a very interesting shock in a beautiful way, that I found that maybe if the art is not only in the hands of gallery and museums, because I think it's such a boring idea. You open a door, behind it there's art, is, no offense, but it's really so boring. How can we take the art from outside these boundaries of imagination and bring to the space where everyone, any age, any time, any culture, any background can perceive this experience? So I was extremely inspired by the concept of public art, and always constantly thinking about how to take the art out of these boundaries of architecture. And especially Le Corbusier, I think, saying this very, very nicely: architecture is judged by eyes that see, by the head that turns, and the legs that walk. Architecture is not a synchronic phenomenon, but a successive one made up of pictures, adding themselves one to the other, following each other in time and space, like music. And I found that this quote is fantastic to follow another dream, which was, of course, Frank Gehry's Disney Hall. So when I came to Los Angeles, and I was very much inspired by the idea of going to downtown Los Angeles, find this building, one of my hero Frank Gehry's, and LA Field, the home of one of the most wonderful Philharmonic orchestra in the world, and go and witness the building. It was 2 a.m. at night. It was a very weird experience. I just rented a car and went there, and it was so weird. Like, it was dark and nobody on the streets. It was so dystopian, but I was just expecting something much more, impactful. But then I was thinking very, very sharply, like, okay, if a building can learn, like, can it dream? If this building one day can remember its own memories, I think this idea of a data becomes a memory, or memory becomes a data, and the building eventually connects with machine intelligence, started around 2012 September. And of course, when I talk about this with my professors and the people around me at the UCLA, of course, people like said, like, are you sure? Like, what do you want to do again? Like, I just said, I want a project on the Disney Hall, and I want to take this like a living organism. I want to like transform it into like a living architecture. I think it's a beautiful sculpture in the world that needs some, some sort of speculation about near future. I emailed Frank Gehry, of course. I emailed LA Philharmonic. Of course, as a student, I didn't get any reply. And pretty much any friends and colleagues were saying like, you are pretty much crazy to do something like that instead of like going much humble roads. But as Wittgenstein said, what is thinkable is possible. I was suddenly on the stage with wonderful minds at Microsoft Research, and one of my project in the entire competition, I was one of the person on the stage, by the way, with my short. I wasn't even aware of where I will be, which very funny. This whole story leads to the very funny thing, but I was able to share my idea of like, can a building dream or can it like hallucinate? And then it gets very well received and get Best Vision Award, which is significant funding and a support from Microsoft Research, and then eventually lead me to like being also in the Bill Gates collection. It's a very interesting path, but having one of the most wonderful persons and collection and getting the support from Microsoft Research was something remarkably motivation. And then later on, of course, thanks to Gehry Technologies and then Sheldon, we were able to get the Disney Hall building. And thanks to Greg Lynn, back in time it was Digital AUD, was very much connected with our department. Thanks to Greg Lynn, I was able to get all this data and start, creating the perception of the building. And I just graduated with this piece of physical mocap in 2014. And that's how I met with also wonderful people at LA Philharmonic. But they said, instead of doing something outside the building, why not we start doing something inside the building, which was a great call. And I said, yes, let's try. And then there was a fantastic call from the SFK Salonen, one of the most wonderful conductor and laureate also at LA Philharmonic. And with his invitation, we were able to visualize what is this Amerik piece, which I know him very well from the Philips Pavilion 1958, which is one of the first, maybe early example of embedding media arts into architecture back in like 1958. But for me, what was really inspiring is how can we transform the human body motion of the conductor so that he doesn't only conduct the time, but he can also conduct the space meaning the polygons, like the walls and let's bring this consciousness model to the space that can also hear the music with us and make kind of a narrative with the data that the building holds. What we are watching is a 3-channel projection back in 2014 November, and listening the music with 8-channel sound in real time and watching a real-time graphics transforming into a performance on the polygons of Frank Gehry's Disney Hall while the 110 musicians are performing. But of course, when you think about an idea like this, it's not easy. Like we were really, if you can see this video clearly, we are trapped in this universe of like, hacking the architecture, transforming the environment into like kind of a way of transforming itself. But for me, the stress, not the stress I can say, but the excitement is my hero, like Frank Gehry is coming to watch this experiment and this experience. And I was extremely inspired because there's 3,000 people every night. And I was just shocked that a machine is computing this idea to 3,000 people, and one of them is my hero. And when I say Frank Gehry, I mean, as we all know, he is really very important and he really cares about the authenticity. So I was afraid of what will happen. But the good news, he came to the green room and he was saying something extremely positive and saying, that was an amazing experience, but also he was saying, we may not need anymore these boring screens comes from top to down. And there was an incredible feedback because it's just the feeling of your hero supports you is the feeling that you just keep yourself from, that I wish every young mind in here that listening, hope you have your heroes can help you one day or support you one day. And that was the energy that allowed me to start the studio. Is the second part of my lecture right now. I'm so happy to say that right now we are a group of people that are transforming the imagination together. And I want to show very much, just a second, I want to show the more updated version of the studio. Here we go. So, because we have there we go. These are updated image and photos of my also wonderful friends and colleagues. So we can speak 14 language and we can represent 10 different countries. And here is a very significant hope I have is we are trying to create art for anyone, any age and any background. And the whole idea here is create a kind of a scholar system, not academically, let's say in a classical way, or not like a cliche, like a commercial world. It's kind of a new hybrid thinking, a new studio logic, a studio like culture that we are developing. And really one of the most important thing that we do is kind of like transforming our ideas into many different countries and many different locations in the world. And what is really very inspiring for me is if you see this slide, please don't get me wrong. And this is not a cliche slide of boring startups trying to say these things. It's truly a collaboration with these organizations like Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, Intel, or Siemens. This is not just, a boring logo thing. They really shared their knowledge, their hardware, their software. I think what happened in the studio is very much maybe closer to what happened in Renaissance. And I was very fortunate to work with these giants as a studio. And we get the best pigment, the best brush in Renaissance, same thing, the best hardware, the best data, the best software. And in NASA GPL, for example, we are working with one of the most inspiring engineers in the world and so on. So I just want to share that very openly, and just don't get me wrong about that. We only purely do art in the studio. But I think what really transforms who we are is, of course, our sensitivity to information, our sensitivity to the data, like what data means in 21st century, and how actually as a humanity, we are constantly becoming these weird things that are like constantly using data from our population is increasing, our total internet user number is going like out of control, but it also have an effect on the climate. And we know that our egocentric decisions like likes, comments, and shares are making an impact in the universe. And at the meantime, data is becoming every single day much larger, but also becoming these whole new ways of understanding. And I think Jack Burnham says is very clearly that the specific function of art has been to show that art does not reside in material entities, but in relationship between the people and between people and the components of their environment. And while I heavily agree with that, but also Kierkegaard says that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And for me, one of these things to understand the life is data. So very much first our big project, I guess, my most probably proud first project in terms of data and sculpture in public space was thanks to SOM and Kilroy in San Francisco. This public art project was a massive competition that I was able to use one of the most beautiful canvas, I think, in the world. But the project was really looking for how can we use open data from the city of San Francisco and transform the three-dimensional screen, which is an incredible, as we know, the corner problem, and transform this data into a three-dimensional surface and transform it into a living kind of a data sculpture for the public art. So let's watch very quickly this quick video. one of the most inspiring part of this project was being also able to use social media data such as Twitter, and we were able to generate this living data sculpture that gets information every single night from the Twitter API and reconstruct the city of San Francisco, which I think the memories of the city becoming some kind of like cartography and reconstructing the memories of the past into a data sculpture every single day. The project received many awards and recognition, and as far as I know, it's the first 3D data sculpture in the world that has been embedded into architecture purposefully and became this major success for our studio that allows us to go beyond this idea. And recently, we have been working with many similar ideas around the world, pretty much every city, maybe so every continent except Antarctica. And also 2 years ago, we were able to create a piece in North Carolina, Charlotte, and that was a fantastic support from the CLT airport. And we were able to visualize the entire global flight activities and also like work with the CLT airport's local data, such as like arrival, departure gates, parking lot chains. I mean, you name it, anything that we can receive from the information, they were becoming space. So what you see is on the left side is a real-time data sculpture. On the right side, frozen data sculptures. One is exploring the real times of information. One is exploring like the frozen aspect of the data. And this project really was also one of our most significant space augmenting like a people mover by showcasing the data of the airport, the members of the airport. And then later on, really, we just look for different level of information. And especially recently in Auckland, we were able to visualize even the other invisible signals, such as 5G, LTE, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. And recently, I'm much more inspired by how can we make invisible visible and how can we transform these signals around us that can also become a space. Well, it was just one of the really exciting projects, and I hope that to share more about this project when it's up and running very soon. But I think really what has inspired me also a lot is 2012 when I started DMA at UCLA. Casey Rias, one of my hero, and who is also the pioneer with Ben Fry, invented the processing. He was a fantastic mentor, but also I was started to talk about like, can data become a pigment? And thanks to his support and also like his vision, I was able to start working with the code and data and wind patterns. So what we are seeing is basically a simple augmentation of a wind patterns collected in 1 year from the Logan Airport, and then basically the wind direction, the wind speed, and technically air pressure and temperature as becoming an experience in a data painting concept. And this was, as far as I know, one of the first example of using data as a pigmentation speculation on a built environment and a physical and a 3D space. What was really amazing about this experiment was, of course, when I think the project get public and there was a beautiful reaction from the residents and around Boston and from Pierre. But what was really inspiring is like people find some kind of a relief, some kind of, I think, psychological reaction to the piece. And I think, but when I think about data as a pigment or data as a space, I don't like just thinking about itself as something like a numbers. And I feel that like the wind, like the temperature, environment, and the even air quality, I think everything for me starts like a feeling of a space. But to really explain this, I mean, I'm always showing these artistic computation concepts. I'd really like imagine the wind speed and the pressure and the temperature, and the wind direction becomes these attractors, and these attractors can really compute their logic based on the reality of the nature. And I really find that very inspiring because it can really generate some amazing, like a poetic functioning, some surfaces that are based on the memories of the nature. So I think that's one of the reasons this project is all over the world, like this type of ideas, like in Auckland, in San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Dubai, London, Istanbul, Seoul, and Tokyo. Like it's really like it's every city now is trying to like kind of have its own kind of data painting. But for me, the inspiration came from this beautiful quote from Philip K. Dick, which I would like to talk about this. Philip K. Dick says, reality is that which doesn't go away when you stop believing in it. A simulation is that which doesn't stop when the stories go away. Stories are responsible to our human desire for resolution, but a simulation is responsible only to its own laws and initializing conditions. A simulation has no moral, prejudice, or meaning like nature, it just is. I think it's a fantastic and a perfectly aligned vision what we are doing with this data. Another fun project called Bosphorus, using also high radar frequency activities of the sea surface and transforming into another simulation. And constantly last maybe 3 years as a studio, we are finding those nature memories and transforming them into this kind of simulations and transforming into this immersive art installations, and constantly looking different data, localization of information, and transform this information into different forms. If you would like to enjoy these simulations, they're on my website, and I'm sure the Zoom is not the best place to like show you the high quality experience and a very low FPS. So you are very welcome to watch those experiences on my webpage as well. And in this journey, as you see, the computer graphics are the core of imagination. As you see, like these ideas cannot be done without computer graphics because they're at the end, even though data become a pigment or AI becomes a conscious, at the end, the representation is computer graphics, right? I want to just give a big respect to one of my also hero, Jensen Huang, who we met almost 4 years ago, who was also one of the strong supporter as NVIDIA of our journey. We were always constantly collaborating with these, pioneers of computer graphics, pioneers of AI, and many others. So, for example, we did this project called Cornel Box 3 years ago in Cologne. This was for representing RTX technology, which allows you to render things in real time. Also, in our practice, we are using a lot of game engines such as Unreal Engine and Unity. And in this piece, we augment three-dimensional surface with a trompe-l'oeil. And from one perspective, that was what people were seeing. So what you watch was completely real time. And again, 3 years ago, this was one of the first example of using real-time reflection, light and shadow. And what does this mean for us is, of course, take our data sculptures and paintings, last 3 years, all of them almost real time, running with live data. Another project that really transformed what we are doing is inspired by the amazing William Blake code called Infinity Room. Also inspired, of course, from the Kusama's amazing Infinity Mirrored Rooms. But truly the idea was, like the Doors of Perception book, I was extremely inspired by the concept of how can we actually go to a space that doesn't have the gravity problem, the corner problem, a space that can be, beyond that door is just, there's no floor, there's no ceiling, there's no gravity. The project called Infinity Room transformed almost more than 2 million people. So far, is it more than 50 cities in the world, and it's one of our most traveling project that is touching many people. And now I want to jump into the last chapter of the keynote, which is where I start to use machine intelligence in my practice. Maybe you remember this image from one of the most inspiring maybe research that have been shared by Google. And I was one of the really like a very, lucky person that was able to work with this team behind this project. It's, by the way, for people who want to know, Alex Mortvintsev is one of the math scientists at Google behind also this image you are seeing called Inception, in collaboration with Mike Tyka and many others. I was very fortunate, 2016, inspired by the same group and invited by the same group in San Francisco at Gray Area. And I was one of the participants of a conference about arts and AI. And I was there, maybe I'm the only one who didn't use AI, but I was so fortunate to get invitation from Blaise Agorey-Arcas, Mike Tyka, and Kenrick McDowell. And I was able to work with the wonderful people there to generate a new journey in my life. But when I talk about AI and potentially using machine as a collaboration, I was extremely sensitive when I heard about the potential. Because of these potentials of ethics, and of course, any technology have a ramification, as we all know. But when I think about these, big entities and their potential, it was not that simple to perceive, right? Because as we all know very well, like this Google Glass project was something how it's perceived, how we were like supposed to use it. But when the project come alive, we just say completely something different, right? So I think the difference between the reality and the dream and the function and the structure and all these kind of problems and the ramification of technology was always makes me, question what exactly we will be seeing. But at the meantime, as a person in love with science fiction, when like in that year, Delirium was getting approval, at the meantime, all these like personal assistants were getting as smart as possible. But also at the meantime, we all know that the Facebook problem was rising. And I think it was really, really very challenging to really understand what AI can do. But I didn't want to be stuck in this, ramification world. I didn't want to be in the dystopian world. I was just looking for something optimistic, something that has a much more purposeful and impactful reason. For example, like DeepMind. Like DeepMind was creating constantly incredible research about AI and trying to like generate meaningful research and share their goals and very publicly. Or there are incredible researchers in the world trying to make materials that can compute. Or there are like neuroscientists like trying to read brain activities by AI. Or, who knows what will happen, but Elon Musk Neuralink project. There are really interesting stories when I was 2016, 17, understanding this ecosystem. So while all this happening, I was very fortunate to work with the Arts and Machine Learning group as an arts in residence and start working with AI. As Blaise Agorey-Arcas says, like the invention of applied pigments, printing press, photography, and computers, we believe machine intelligence is an innovation that will profoundly affect art. He was absolutely right. Like any new technology, it is completely changing how we think and imagine with machines. I want to thank you very much to Mike Tyka, who is my mentor back in time, a wonderful artist and an engineer, researcher at Google, who allowed me and my team to deep dive into the world of AI. For me, the inspiration was super simple. As a human model of consciousness, how can we take information into a knowledge and to a wisdom, and how I can take this ideation into a world of narrative? How can we apply this model to the architecture? How can we speculate this universe beyond just data, but a kind of a meaningful, purposeful journey? Inspired from this amazing story from the Jorge Luis Borges, and I was completely started to think about like what else can we generate with this idea of a mental model. As again, J. Wright Foster says, the image of the world around us, which we carry in our head, is just a model. Nobody in his head imagines all the world, government, or country. He has only selected concepts and relationships between them and uses those to represent the real system. I think very simply, humans develop a mental model of the world based on what they're able to perceive with their limited senses. And I just want that perhaps this whole idea and speculation could be a fantastic place, such as in a library. And I was very fortunate to get an invitation from Wasif Korton, one of the most wonderful and hero and a mentor and director of SALT Archives, which is a research institution, allows you to research their 1.8 million documents publicly in a metadata, all digitized, and they invite to generate this concept inside a library by transforming a three-dimensional space where you can go inside and interact with AI, but also see how AI performs its learning and remembering and making a meaning process. To make this project, we analyzed 1.7 million documents and mostly inspired by the idea of a machine intelligence, analyzing these concepts inside this metadata. And of course, back in time, I was extremely inspired by the concept of latent space. For people who wants to learn about it, it's a really remarkable concept. When a machine learns, it just stores the information in a space called latent space, which we cannot perceive as humans as a mathematical space, an abstract space, we can like manifold space. It's a basically times 24 dimension if you wish, but there is no way we can perceive, right? And I was so much compelled and intrigued by how can we see this universe? How can we make this invisible visible? And just what was a fantastic, of course, learning curve, that there are algorithms in AI studies that allows you to see these universes, which is a one simple line of code that allows you to lower dimension from 10 to 24 to 3 dimension, which gives you these data universes. So what you are seeing here is basically 1.7 million documents and their concept individually colorized based on what the context of that specific image cluster. And ideally, what turns to me is literally data universes or AI data sculptures starts to appear in my practice since 2016. The project was one of the first examples of using AI in public space in the form of like an architectural installation. And it was a very fortunate moment for me to learn about if a machine can learn, can it dream? The speculation of a machine hallucination started also almost 5 years ago. And not only just that, we also use the same technology, same concepts, same algorithms in different forms, such as recently, and 2 years ago, actually, not recently anymore, this project with LA Philharmonic appeared in the LA Phil. And what you are seeing here is a three-dimensional data sculpture augmented by the light and sound in real time. But the more I guess, start to like imagine about the future of data, I was 2017 in Istanbul and I witnessed something very unfortunate. And I learned that unfortunately my uncle was stage 2 Alzheimer. And it was a very heavy learning curve because the idea of like memories are gone, that you cannot perceive them anymore. That was just something very heavy moment in my life. And I was so like get inspired from this, the moment of remembering or the moment of understanding how a memory can become again a physical existing experience. I just started this journey with the memories as well. So thanks to UCSF Professor Adam Ghazali and his team at Neuroscape, we were able to use this incredible research technique and this EEG machine. And by our team, we were able to detect a 32-channel EEG device. And by using big data sets of memory recordings, we were able to analyze and find a pattern of remembering and try to analyze it through the AI from the Washwan et al.'s EEG learn algorithm. And we were transformed them into a 3-dimensional computer generated data sculptures that are representing the moment of remembering. And these eventually turn into an experience, but also a functional tool that a neuroscientist can plug the data and also find the correlations. So it's not just a fancification of a shiny pixels. It's truly a functional tool that had been used in scientific studies. The result was melting memories. What are we watching is a 5 meter by 6 meter 2D data sculpture augmented by Trompe l'oeil and visualizing 4 milliseconds of the moment of remembering. As Carl Sagan says, imagination will often carry us to the worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. I was extremely inspired. This very, you remember the mission hallucination concept. By the way, to just give credits to all the wonderful people behind the GAN algorithms, which I'm extremely inspired, and StyleGAN and StyleGAN2 and PGGAN. I was last 3 years, now maybe 4 years actually, since 2017, completely trying to understand how a machine can generate hallucinations. And I know it's a very science fiction term, but I want to explain you what's going on here. So when a machine learns information, especially in the GAN algorithm, a discriminator and the generator kind of have this like dialogue, let's call it like that. And then at the end, there's a machine decides some sort of like reality, right, in a model. But what I found is very challenging is how on earth we can perceive the universe that the machine generated its own consciousness. And I found that incredibly inspiring that the latent space is one of the most inspiring space, which we cannot generate a plan or section, but we know that it exists in a mathematical universe. So over the last now maybe 4 years, we were able to generate these custom softwares. For example, what you see here is a latent space browser. I am literally generating on the left side, flying with a joystick in 3D space, finding a location from a data set of Renaissance architecture. I am just selecting a moment in the columns, a moment from the facade or from the window on the floor or the ceiling, and then let the machine generate in between universe. And I found that these are kind of a way of like generating machine hallucinations. And we were able to apply this idea to the cities like New York, Stockholm, London, Los Angeles, and Istanbul, and many others, and Seoul. We were also applied this idea to like pretty much any architectural domain. I also like have been very fortunate to work with back in like my heroes, such as like Frank Gehry, Zaha Hadid, Tadao Ando, and so on. Like I was just trying to like learn what was the inspiring connection between this universe of inspiration. And recently also working with NASA GPL engineers and designers and researchers, we were so fortunate to also deep dive into 60 years of data archives of NASA GPL. And this another idea of using space dreams, looking for the collective memories. Specifically, my purpose in this research is try to detach ego from data and find the collective memories for humanity, such as maybe our next home, right? But I'm not only stuck with the idea of generating just, beauty with the machine intelligence, but also speculate a space. Like, how can we perceive this n-dimensional universe? So these are like very early 3D data sculptures, 2018 and 19, and this year we are making them ready in an exhibition opening up in a couple of weeks. So constantly understanding cartographies of spaces, constantly understanding of space as a whole input for humanity, which is ISS dataset, as you may see. But also what I love about it is the city as a whole living entity. For last year, we were able to work with Artec House in New York, and we were able to generate a machine hallucination installation by using 18-channel projection, and we augmented the Chelsea Market 120 years boiler room. So the project reached more than 100,000 people, and it was really a very, very unique experience stepping inside a 3D space and become a part of a narrative and a synthetic architecture concept. And we were able to generate similar experiments all around the world. In Berlin, in Kraftwerk, we were able to transform a 60 years old also power plant. Also this time, we were able to generate 3-dimensional data sculptures in the air by using lasers and mirrors and try to regenerate the neural networks as a space and regenerate and drove them based on the data findings. And when we do these projects, by the way, every project has this architectural scale. Like if you see these drawings, they are not just like simple thinking or a sketch on a paper. They are really designing a very complex backend, software, hardware, spatial design, exhibition design, sound design. Research and the data and the AI, like it's a really big ecosystem of imagination that aligns with the architecture to perceive in the 2D or then later in 3D space. And of course, we are very careful about how we train our neural networks. We are extremely careful about usage of energy in the studio. And I'm happy to say that all our training process is a kind of all carbon offsetted. And recently, we were very fortunate to get an invitation from the National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne, and we were able to use one of the most amazing data from the Google AI quantum team's quantum advantage research, and we were able to use neural networks of 200 millions of nature-focused data trained by AI, and we use quantum computation data sets to generate quantum noise and let the AI hallucinate alternative dimensions by a scientifically truth-based story. That was a really unique project. I'm happy to answer more questions about that. And lastly, to finish my presentation today, I want to go back to this a dream project that I was mentioning in 2014 or 2012, that Frank Gehry, my hero's wonderful piece, and also LA Philharmonic fantastic home, Walt Disney Concert Hall. 2018, LA Philharmonic was looking for the 100-year celebration, and for that, they were really looking for the purposeful and impactful narrative. They were not going for just, fireworks. They were trying to generate a meaningful piece for the city of Los Angeles, and they were trying to generate this piece to really celebrate their 100 years and also navigate their next 100 years, also make a free, publicly free, an experience for the city of Los Angeles. Of course, can a building dream? Like, can it remember? And it was one of the most challenging project and the challenging question. But thanks to LA Philharmonic Archives, they were able to generate these incredible data sets of 100 years of information from, like, if you want to listen, 77,000 audio recordings will take 38 years to hear. if you want to listen them. Like we get 90,000 video files, each of them approximately 2 hours. And we got like enormous amount of like image memories, image archives from the Disney Hall, the building that it holds its memories, visual memories. We also get beautiful drawings from, of course, the sketches and the 3D files of Frank Gehry, and lookup sheets back in the 100 years back to the LA Philharmonic's every single performance ever done in the history. But the challenge here is not only data, but also execution of the idea. How can you transform a compound curve, reflective surface, by augmenting with light? Of course, it was not easy. We were able to use 13 unique locations, and each of them had 4 projectors. In total, we had 42 projectors. Each of them is 30,000 luminance, and we used 13 kilometers of like fiber cable. It was just a ridiculously challenging installation, to say very openly. But thanks to the LA Philharmonic, City of Los Angeles, and the Frank Gehry's support, the project happened 2018 September. To really make the project, we went back to the FOGA archives and asked for the original 3D models, and we took them and transformed them into a canvas. It was really inspiring to take the building, deconstruct it, and look at the inside, outside, see through the facade, and make invisible structure of the building visible, reconstruct new materials, and even speculate new materials and new structures with the AI. So it was a very inspiring process of how you can take cultural beacon and transform it into a whole new canvas for these near future stories. And of course, not only that, we also look at every single decision of the institution. For example, for 100 years, we check every single event, every single performance, concert, and venue, the time, the conductor, the artist, and take all this information and also generated 3-dimensional data sculptures. Later on became a pigmentation on the building, being able to fly in the 100 years of decisions, kind of a time tunnel. So just create this conscious model, I guess, for the architecture that it's inhabiting the information. And not only that, of course, we ask other questions like what happens if AI goes to a concert? What will it see? What will it perceive? Like what will kind of understand? So we just generate many experiences by using neural networks, and especially image recognition algorithms, and take entire image archives and train many different neural networks. And specifically, we use VGG16 algorithms that allows us to transform the institutional data and the data inside the building and transform this into a data sculptures, as you see the connection between the points represented in the archives of the building. And of course, when we say LA Philharmonic, the music is everything, right? We were so fortunate to work with the Google Magenta team, and we were able to look at this enormous sound data with the help of Parag Mittal. We were able to generate this beautifully challenging project of how to look at these 256 unique attributes, such as like a pitch, timbre, amplitude, tempo, tonality, and so on. And this generated these 6-dimensional data sculptures. What you are seeing is every particle here represents a 10 seconds long sound clip, and they are sorted by the similarities, and the color represents similarity as well. And lastly, of course, the most challenging part, how can a building dream? So I thought that if one day a building can have its own consciousness, of course, the first thing maybe it will ask, do I need to look like this? So the challenge was, can we train an AI of the building with every single images ever taken and let the building learn its own entity and reconstruct them into 3-dimensional sculptures? And the music you are hearing is also not real. And using all this data transformed into a piece, and I would like to show you a short clip from the piece called Walt Disney Dreams. was the last chapter of the performance. And what was really amazingly inspiring for me is, first of all, seeing my hero one more time and next to the piece and having his blessings and very positive reaction, and even saying that he was really surprised that his also dream was augmenting this building with also the lights, and having his dream coming alive, and also like my dream coming alive, and having another time hero support was something very special, sometimes something very important. I think I really wish all of us to remember our heroes and the mentors one more time. And I want to say that we just don't only create works for certain search cases, we work with the initiatives, nonprofits, United Nations, and try to also understand how can we be helpful for other problems of the humanity, and trying to make art for anyone, any age, and any background. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I'm a little bit longer than expected, but happy to take questions if we have still time. Thank you, and you are very welcome to email anytime to me.
Fantastic. Rafiq, thank you so much for such an inspiring and super engaging presentation. It was really feels like much needed fresh breath of air. So since we don't have much time, we have about 15 minutes. We've been getting questions, and again, I want to encourage people, if you have any questions, just put in the Q&A. So obviously you're gonna get the first question, you would probably got that a lot. So what I'm gonna try to do is to combine question with the same categories. Obviously the number one, which is almost 4 or 5 students asked about it in a different way. First, what's your workflow of software? Like what's your favorite scripting methods? And also there was one specific question about Blender, as now is a new software. Would the students, now students are super inspired. They wanna know, where do you put their egg in one basket? What should you focus? Where do they start if you want to get the dream like
Great question. So as a person alone, I started my journey with Cinema 4D, and then of course Rhino, but then of course the world doesn't fit into these linear experiments, and eventually I started learning VVVV, which is a custom software development tool, where I started learning about visual programming language, which I built on top of them. But as a studio at the moment, we are pretty much using Blender, Cinema 4D, Houdini, Unreal Engine, Unity, like everything. And for me, what I'm seeing in the Houdini, the potential of using data, Houdini is a very powerful tool. I mean, I'm sure Blender is also incredible, which we are also using, by the way, for our previs. Our many like pre-releasing tools are used in Blender. But I found that Houdini is extremely strong when you have the VEX code capacities and using other GPU computational rendering techniques such as Octane or Redshift. The things get really, really in a very, very exciting way. But what really made me much more comfortable is, of course, game engines, Unreal and Unity. I do not believe that these softwares will be only just the key for the future of portfolio developments, and especially if you want to need to use data in your work or some sort of machine intelligence. I believe looking at the game engines are much important than just one simple software.
Yeah, so fantastic. The second one, I'm going to combine 2 or 3 other questions that actually they were talking about the sound. Like they noticed that you have light and display accompanying that. Is that audio generated before or after the composition of data or the visualization? Also, what do you think could ever be part of that composition of the data?
Yes, so there's a very, I think, so there's a couple of aspects of it. So first of all, why that data, right? There's sometimes a narrative from a project, sometimes the building itself is the inspiration, institution is the inspiration, or I am the inspiration. I have really like all this kind of like landscapes of different ways of thinking. But at the end, I have these obsessions on certain algorithms. I am in love with like the noise algorithms. I am in love with the fluid dynamics like last 10 years. So you will constantly see that in my work that I'm constantly recreating those data sets by using these blocks of like particles, millions of information reconstructing itself, like constantly working with fluid dynamics in my work is one obsession that is not just random, but it's a journey in 10 years. So that's something that I see to myself, to my practice, to my team is really intentionally for a 10 years of journey. And additionally, I'm really inspired by the potential of machine intelligence, which is specifically, like, as you may see, the height maps and the other like ways of plotting information from the machine's mind or latent space. These are like really, it's literally like different ways of thinking with data. For example, also image archives, right? They are whole different universes. That's why I'm obsessed with last 5 years now. Like these TSNE, UMAP algorithms, like they have their own characteristics, how machine can sort the information. So they're all like different entities at the same time, exploring like multi-dimensional thinking. So it's very nonlinear thinking. But those are like my very, very much inspired and motivated algorithms and pipelines.
Very nice. So the next question by our director for the School of Architecture, Jason Young. They say, thank you for sharing inspirational work. You invoke the idea of giving data structure, politics, and poetic. Your work seems like an important attempt to just do that. Can you talk more about the politics part of the invocation? For example, are you compelled by those who worry about data mining and practices of surveilling things like big data? Or are you trying to get into some other alignments and other sort of political economies that your work is clearly transcending critique? But was curious. He's curious for you talk more about that, right?
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm intentionally trying my very best from the very first work is how I can detach ego from data, because I think the fundamental problem here is the ego, is the person-centric experiences of certain data. And I know that the systems we are using every single day, we are agreeing those contracts all over the place on all this media and all kind of systems. I think that problem is already like evolved and it's there, but I'm trying to find another exciting, inspiring, and what else can we do with that situation? Because I think it may be much functional and fast and hopefully be perceivable easily, which is literally detaching ego from data, collective memories, what kind of other data set that we can perceive from the same information. If you look at social media, the hashtagging and other performance, they are all like really one ways of remembering, but can we use the same systems and same technologies and just create something different from them, maybe completely different like outputs from these existing systems. The other thing, of course, when we see these systems like remembering us and, like becomes these prediction engines, of course, the free will and the privacy is gone. And of course, one of those two big keywords in my practice is how can we don't touch the privacy and the free will at the same time. And it's hard. I don't have a answer like this, but I know that the systems we have at the moment are not caring about those two keywords for sure. At least they look like they are caring about it for some certain reasons. And their politics are the problem, right? Because they try to survive from this madness. But I think as an artist, I just found this, in my work, at least, I do my best to explain which algorithms we are using, which data set we content coming from, and what else can we do with it. And I'm trying to ask this question through the artworks in the installation and open and share as open as possible and bring the conversation from the public space to the artworks.
Fantastic. And I love the anecdote when you had at the end that Siri laughed and also Alexa laughed at the conversation what they're having. So the next question from Professor Abigail Saxi, she asks, thank you very much for great presentation. I'm curious if the matters to Rafiq or to you, whether people recognize the art is on data and why.
It is a very important narrative in my work. I mean, of course, you can generate any computer graphics with any reasons and any machine randomness, but it's not that story. It already can be done. But here the story is how can we transform a memory of a machine, memory of a nature, and re-encode that existence kind of to regenerate a new kind of a language. And that's my journey, at least. And I don't think when you use AI algorithms, like for example, one of our pioneer pieces using GAN algorithms onto like this fluid dynamics that world, for example, last 4 or 5 years, I mean, very openly saying someone comes and hugs that I don't know in mission hallucination and says some certain personal memories, or when I wake up to a very 100+ people's personal memories of saying some certain things, I think there's an interesting symbiotic relationship here with the algorithm, with the data, with the AI, and with the audience. So for me, what they perceive, of course, very important, and being as open as possible about what that emotion is coming from. It's an honesty. Of course, everything can be random, but I mean, I don't think everything is random as well. So in quantum physics, right, the observer problem or observer chance is a very incredible topic. That's why quantum memories, for example, is really try to speculate that it's nothing random there. It's a deterministic noise algorithm driving an AI to generate alternative, kind of universes. So I think I'm constantly speculating this idea around data, around machines. And I don't think many of them can be done without data. Their movement is coming from a past memory of reality.
Fantastic. We have a question from Brent Marshall. The question, as you dive into ML, machine learning, or neural networks driven pieces, and things get more abstract, how do you keep the visualization meaningful to the or connected to the source data?
Super great questions. I have two types of models, as you may see in the work, since archive dreaming, heavily inspired by the lower dimension reduction. At least in my work, whenever I have a big data, the first thing I do is a contact sheet, and of course, the UMAP and TSNE algorithms. It's a very significant, I think, signature thing that I do in every single project. It's just openness. It's a truth behind the data. If it's a Vin data, I sometimes plot the raw data in the installation, and I sometimes show behind the scenes to just give that clarity and openness. And of course, in the GAN algorithms, specifically like training millions of images of nature, for example, of course, the AI just creates a narrative because it's the nature photo sets, right? It's all the national parks in the world, the forest, the ocean, it's just the clouds, it's just the reality itself is the data. And I don't think we have any more problems of what exactly am I seeing. But technically, that's a machine-generated hallucinative nature. So I think I'm just going forward to these last 4 years, try to generate these narratives around reality and the unreality and the machine and the human, that kind of concept to make it much more, I guess, narrative, the didactic, but still keep the poetry and the abstraction of the structure and the function of the narratives.
Splendid. We have one question from Akshada Dusa. She's a graduate student here. Here's her question. With the relatively new kind of data implementation on the built environment, how does the trajectory of architects' role change? Also, can architects work with multimedia artists to become curators of programmed space to explore the range of outcomes and outputting fixed, singular, and design solution?
So I think that's a great question, because very openly saying, whenever I collaborate with architects and engineers of the certain design processes, we always have some kind of a success story. Success meaning making dream to reality. We were able to engage with public space. We were trying to generate the democratic experience of some near future experiences. We were able to embed data into the space, media arts into the architecture. Like SOM, like Gensler, like Frank Gehry, like all these projects have this certain aspect of collaboration. So whenever we collaborate with like the Arup, SOM, and the Kilroy, right? Whenever we collaborate with Frank Gehry, LA Phil, and Los Angeles, you always generate this beautiful new meaning from the architecture that is not maybe the first thing an architect should think about it. And the function of the space may be something else for an architect, but for me, as someone else from the different world coming, that I don't have a biased material concept, or I don't need to worry about gravity or like the certain material properties, maybe the world is different. And I don't think any architect has to know about this universe, and it's just a pure collaboration, as Lev Manovich said. And I think that feature is much inspiring than, no offense, but just a predictable function and structure.
Now, there's a question that I was thinking about throughout the whole presentation, since it started about the influence of science fiction as inspiration for the future of design innovation. The concept that always jumps in my head, the E.M. Foster's The Machine Stops, that was written in 1909, right? And then it featured video column teleconferencing idea that's even before the TV was presented. And then 100 years later, we saw the FaceTime by Apple and actually what we're doing now in Zoom, right? What was fascinating that you showed us tonight, a glimpse of what the future of data visualization and how it can transform a perception of architecture, right? For me, as my side as an architect, and it has the potential to transform the whole perception and you pioneering that. Do you see the impact of your work on the design of the canvas itself, like the static, what you call the architecture canvas, right? So what I'm interested to know is that, do you think it's more powerful what you've done to augmentedly, virtually transform a simple building facade versus a complex surface like the Frank Gehry Disney? Since you worked on both, I was both equally intrigued by the early of your work with a simple concrete block and also the last one. So can you elaborate on this part a little bit?
It's a great point. I think honestly, I'm just trying my very best to inspire from the architecture, inspire from the canvas as well. like really the Sana's beautiful, like minimalistic approach to the concrete and the function of it, like a school of design, or as you said, Frank Gehry's beautiful compound curvature of his imagination and the home of Falafel. I think the palette is incredibly rich, but I think the function starts to appear the same. We know that the physical reality of life has certain limitations. And I think art is one of those ways of unfolding that problems, unfolding those limitations, like in science fiction, in literature, or in media arts, or, you know, any kind of like art. I mean, even a painting or a sculpture, it doesn't matter. It's about, I think, activating a new idea and activating the space through this, you know, imagination. And I think if architecture allows like people who have this activation, imagination, and new narratives, of course, it will embrace the future of architecture in a much different. I'm not talking about just cheesy holographic approach in science fiction movies. I'm really thinking about like functional narratives that are beyond just, you know, boring billboards. Of course, there are many, many inspiring ideas, and I mean, it's really not hard to think that in near future, like those all the AC, you know, monitoring things will become like kind of a, you know, consciousness models. Maybe you will just say, hey, this building, please remember me more, or forget me today, or dream for me, or not. I mean, these are not anymore like too hard to think about consciousness models applied to the built environments. So it sounds science fiction, but in a couple of decades, I think it will be just so normal to think about them, I guess.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions. It seems we have international audience. So we have Jae-Soo Park from Seoul, Korea. I don't know if you know him or know her. And then he said, "Have you ever done work in Bradbury Building?" And just one.
It's an amazing building, right? I mean, not yet, but I'm hoping
Okay,
maybe
not yet.
after pandemic, maybe try to do something.
We have 2 minutes, so I'll try to get as much that we're getting towards the end of our time, so we won't take over other people's time. So another one from Harry T. Thank you for inspiring work and regards from your Greek neighbors. So someone, it seems from Greece, I assume.
Great to, hello.
Is there in your pipeline future work, potentially visualization for crypto assets that might integrate within our society?
Yes, so I'm very happy to say I'm also now a crypto artist. They are calling it what crypto art. Of course, I am just like a science fiction lover. I'm constantly understanding what new systems, distributions of imagination techniques can be used. I'm currently also producing artworks in the crypto art communities or NFTs, non-fungible token world. And I'm really understanding many different concepts. So I'm also doing a project with Super Rare where we visualize their 1 year of, you know, interchange of data and the artworks, like constantly imagining those things. I think the future of distribution of anything will be very different. I'm not talking about cliche Elon Musk boosts. I'm really talking about like truly functional thinking of these new structures, new politics and politics. I mean, in the crypto world, in the blockchain world, of course, the world is, you know, growing by these new questions. The big question is how can we make them environmentally aware, which I'm now learning more about how this blockchain world is very, very challenging for the nature, which I'm really sad, but also I don't know what is the B plan because it's an incredibly inspiring idea. It's just deconstruct the reality we have. So I'm in this really limbo, like which one is really the what to the go, but definitely crypto world is, I'm heavily invested also in that world also as an artist also there. So I'm producing and creating, and I heavily advise everyone to have a look at upcoming, you know, crypto art world is really inspiring. NFT world is really inspiring.
So I think we're getting to the end of our time, but again, I want to emphasize how much we appreciate that you're taking time out of your extremely busy schedule, and best of luck at finishing your deadline. It was super inspiring for not just me, I think for everybody else. It was great pleasure to finally
Thank you so much.
meet you in person. And thank you so much. And you have a wonderful
Thank you. And just want to say, read Amanda's message as well. Like my email, if you want to remember, refo, my name's her name.com. You are very welcome to email if you have any questions. I may be in a panic mode in production, but I do myself best to like remember and go back and help you. And also we have the internship program. If you feel that what I'm sharing, it makes sense or have a, you know, meaning for you. We have also this, new kind of ways of working. It's an academic environment. This is not like a boring commercial space. We do just art, but you are very welcome to think about that.
Fantastic. Thank you for your gracious support and effort and being here with us. Great. Have a great
Thank you.
night. Thank you.
Great. It's great to meet you. Have a wonderful night. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.